all died. And so in Christ, all will be made alive. We are healed of that relationship. When we came into relationship with Jesus Christ and we gave our lives to Him, we're healed of the fall. We're healed of that thing. In fact, you could say that we are restored to that time of being in the Garden of Eden. And you say, well, it doesn't really feel much like a garden. We still have that to look forward to. But that's the restoration. That's the wholeness that occurs in knowing Jesus. And all that will be saved must enter in that straight gate, that narrow door. And as we do that, we have a change that occurs in us, a change that is just overwhelming. It is, the whole person is changed. In fact, it is being born again, isn't it? This idea of being saved, the idea of being born again, they come together. Jesus said, make every effort. And you know that in times has bothered me, right? Because we know that we don't do anything to earn our salvation, right? It's not like you can do something. It's not like if you come, 5,000 times to the table that you're going to earn your salvation. And so it says, what does it mean by making every effort then? How can I make any effort if I'm not the one who does anything? And isn't that somewhat contradictory to what we understand, Lord? Because we know that we can't earn that. But let's look a little bit further. Okay, back in Luke chapter 13, after his answer in verse 24, he says, make every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able to. Once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside knocking and pleading, Sir, open the door for us. So what's the answer that comes after that then? Well, I don't know you or where you come from. And then you'll say, this is important, listen, we ate and drank with you, and you taught in our streets. Okay. We ate and drank with you, and you taught in our streets. Did you catch that? They ate and drank with him, perhaps inside, through the narrow door already. Perhaps they've been in and out. Perhaps we all go in and out from time to time. And we're allowed to keep going in and out. You ate and drank in his presence. Sounds kind of like communion, doesn't it? You had communion with him. They had communion with the master of the house there. They've been inside. And they've come back out. They've listened to his preaching. They've heard it already. But apparently, if we look at that, one day the door will be shut to those who aren't right with him. And he'll say, I don't know you. He's talking about those who might already call themselves saved. Sozo. They thought they were part of the family. They thought that they'd been through the narrow door many times. And in this passage right here, it kind of argues against this idea of once saved, always saved. Again, we see that that probably is not it. It's not an absolute formula kind of thing. But you could do something, that you could turn your back on him to the point where the door would be shut. And so maybe we do need to make every effort to enter through the door. Maybe that's what Jesus is trying to tell us there. Because I'll tell you what, brothers and sisters, if you haven't felt like you've had a tough time, even just for the weather of this winter, it's hard to stand, isn't it? I think it's Ephesians 6, isn't it? The armor of God. He says, when you've done all, then stand. But you know what? It's not easy to stand, is it? Just to stand. It's kind of like it comes at you like that. It's like a 50-mile-an-hour wind trying to make you stand in that. And so you couldn't give up. You could give up and say, forget it. I'm done. But to give up on him, the door could be shut. And so we have to continue to make every effort. The word he uses in answering that is make every effort to enter through the narrow door. We got to keep working at it. That's what we have to do. And how do we do that? How are we going to make every effort to do that? Especially if we already are a part of the family. We have to stay in relationship with him, don't we? But you know, sometimes when you see something like this, you say, well, maybe he's going to expand upon this in some way or other. Maybe I should look at some of the following passages after that. Maybe we could see how that possibly relates to the things that he's going to teach after this. And I want to briefly do that with you, if you would. In Luke chapter 14, the very next chapter that we have, okay, he answers that question. Make every effort to enter through the door. Okay, how are we going to do this? Well, he goes on and he tells us about the sorrow for Jerusalem that he has. And then look at chapter 14 in the first story that we have there, as you can see in your NIVs. It's titled Jesus at a Pharisee's House. Okay? And this is the idea. Jesus is sitting there watching the guests come in. And, the guests at the banquet want to take the highest places, the best places, And Jesus, makes note of this. And he says, maybe you ought to take the lowest place first. And then if he asks you to move, the master of the banquet asks you to move up to a greater place of honor, that would be a better way to go about it than believing that you should take that high place of honor. Okay? Around verse 7 there, he says, when he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this man your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. So maybe one of the things that he's saying in relation to what we can do, to how we can make every effort, is to be humble, is to humble ourselves. To say, Lord, I don't deserve to come through the narrow door. That could be one of those pieces. Let's look at it a little further, okay? Because he goes on teaching here. In verse 12, he says, then Jesus said to the host, and this is the same host, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you'll be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you'll be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. One of the things we could say out of that is that you should not hang on to your possessions, that you should be generous, that you should not expect repayment necessarily in these things of being generous, that you can expect your repayment in heaven, that you should not be covetous, wanting to hang on to your stuff. It's not mine. So then, keep on, look at the very next one, okay, the parable of the great banquet, okay? And we're just following right along because these are the things that follow that statement, make every effort. And in verse 18, he says, but they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, oh yeah, this is the one where he's inviting people to a banquet once again. And the people who are invited are making excuses and saying, I got more important things to do right now. Okay? So, I'll be able to come, but I just bought a field and I must go and see to it. Please excuse me. Okay? Verse 19. Then another said, I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. There's still another. I just got married, so I can't come. I think he's telling us that we have to be committed there. That what is most important is the invitation to the banquet. We have to remember that. Okay? So we've talked about humility, generosity, commitment. And let's see if we go on further. Where are we? The next story. The cost of being a disciple, it says right there. Verse 25, large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father or mother, his wife or children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple.